Hello, this is the Damson, and today I am going to do a super elementary, super easy, perfect for beginners Christmas tree. We're not going even to sketch anything on the canvas. We're just gonna start with lines from a center to the left and from center to the right. And from time to time, instead of going left or right, we're gonna kind of go slightly down, but we're not going to go too long down, so it's going to be a short line to the front, and that's going to represent branches that are coming forward. So once I did the wet part, which was going left and right, and I did it with a very pale green so you guys can see how that looks. The first one will have to be just with water. What you need to do is make your favorite green color and just start adding little lines again to the left and to the right, and you want the lines on the top to be shorter and then gradually getting longer to the side. And if you see how I'm skipping up, I'm not really making them one after another. And also I have a huge variation of green colors. How do I mix my colors? I use some of my greens mixed either with blue or with yellow, or a lot of times I mix my greens with ochre and creates this beautiful woodsy green. And so we're just gonna build in really fast a Christmas tree, and we're gonna add tons of layers. So you see how I'm spacing those brush strokes, and also they are very different in color. And I'm gonna create now a little bit of a top, and I am trying to stay light and with the color on the top, and I'm gonna add a little bit more darker colors on things that seem more underneath. I need to leave this greens to dry before I start adding more I guess details. This painting definitely is not going to have too much details, but it's going to need a little drying before I go in and add more greens. So I'm just going to add a very pale blue color, and what I'm doing is I am using blue and diluting it with water and just adding it from the sides, kind of pulling it towards the tree, and then with a little bit of water I'm softening the edges, just gently running the brush over the paint, and that softens the edges and makes them disappear. So it's very important, if you're a beginner, to give your painting a little time to dry between layers, because you can get some color very close to a wet area, and then it's gonna start merging with another area that maybe you wanted in a different color. On the end of my video, I added a little boo-boo that I did, and I left it on the end so you guys can see how you can fix things in two different ways. Pretty much the same mistake fixed in two different ways. So I'm adding just wet on the bottom of the tree. And sometimes I'm mixing my blues with a little bit of black in them, and I'm diluting with water, or sometimes adding a little white to that. And when I'm dealing with shadowy sides, also I'm adding a tiny bit of red, and it's bright red, like a magenta red. I'm gonna add on that wet surface, I'm just gonna add a few dots on the white areas, or the areas that are much wider. And because it's wet, those yellow dots will start bursting, and they're gonna look like stars really fast. I am trying to make sure that the area where I'm gonna start adding ornaments, it's completely dry. because if it's not, my ornaments will not keep their shape. So that's why it was important to have those areas dry before we start adding. So if you see, this Christmas tree is very, very pale, and the yellow dots are not dots anymore, they're just bursts of yellow color. This is still wet, so I'm gonna leave it, and I'm touching it because I know it's not very wet, but I really want it to be much drier. So it's still slightly wet, but I want those edges of the paint to just be sharp at this point. So I need my surface to be very dry. Sometimes you can use a blow dryer, or you can just take a break. So I'm making the ornament kind of in a circular motion, but I'm rubbing a little bit more off the paint, kind of on center and top. So this ornament was one of the boo-boos, but I cut that part out, and you're going to find out on the end. I'll show you how I took care of that problem. And there was another one that it's completely gone, so that will be on the end of the video. And that was the area that I had a red ornament that completely got removed, and now there is a blue ornament. So to make this picture a little bit more interesting, we are going to add very vague background, and it's going to be super elementary. I'm gonna continue throughout the whole painting, adding little brush strokes of green, different green colors underneath, and just kind of playing around with the tree. So some will go to the left, some to the right, and some of them are just thicker brush strokes, almost like coming towards us. And you're gonna see how I'm moving my brush stroke, or my brush, in tiny little zigzag almost. Or a few little dabs here and there, and that will just create more layers, and it's going to make it look more three-dimensional and more filled in. So in the beginning we had a very loose and very empty tree, and little by adding different green colors, we are adding more depth to our tree. I'm gonna extend this one slightly because I made it a little too short. And this is supposed to be super easy. I did not speed up this video too much, so you're almost going to see it in real time. And if you see the color that I'm using, it's very pale bluish gray, and the blue mixed with green will just create another green. And I'm adding a little bit of a shadow so that star stands out a little bit more, and I'm adding it to the only one visible side on the star. And there is a little bit more greenish blue Now this one has more blue than green. By adding a shadow underneath the tree, we'll just make it more grounded. So we're gonna add a few little elements right there in the far side. And pretty much what I'm using is I'm using a little bit of that bluish green and adding a few little sticks or branches, whatever you want to call it. And then I'm gonna add kind of like a triangle shapes to represent other pine trees. But that's going to happen little by little because I'm starting with a very pale background, and I'm still gonna keep it pale, but I'm gonna add slightly more color to some of the areas to stand out. So I'm creating that depth. We're gonna have smaller trees back there. So my shadow seems a little bit too pronounced, so I'm gonna try to like soften it a little bit. So I added a little bit of water and just gave a little more blue, but not as dark as the previous shadow underneath. So the building of the trees, it's very vague, and those little pine trees, I'm starting from the top, and in a zigzag motion I'm opening my brush stroke coming down to the ground, supposedly where the ground is, adding a little shadow to one side, very transparent. And those little spikes on the back will represent our trees far away. That is as much as we need there. And I'm going back to the tree and adding few little greenish blue colors, the same colors as the trees on the back, and that kind of is going to bring the whole picture together. I'm gonna add a little bit heaviness to the bottom of the tree, and I'm not going with a complete trace of the lines down there, just a few brush strokes here and there. And also I'm gonna add a little bit of that blue all around. So I'm putting my green inside my blue, and I'm gonna go with another layer. And sometimes it's better to wait for it to dry a little bit before you add. Now I'm using the shape of my brush, and my brush is round number 4, I think, or 6. I think it's a 4. To create those shapes on the tree. So I'm just using the tip and then pushing slightly to create that shape. And that bluish green will bring the tree and the ornaments and the sky and the ground, which is covered with snow, but we have the blue shadows. It's going to bring it together. And you see how the brush strokes that are darker on the tree, some of them are going more angled and some of them are less, and that just made it happen. And here is how we fix mistakes when they happen. So this area was too wet, and now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clean that up completely. I am washing my brush between every swipe and also drying it up so I can scoop the paint. So every time I touch the paint, I'm not just spreading it around, I'm actually scooping it away, cleaning the brush, drying it, and going back into the area. So one side is going to be completely, I'm going to remove this while it's wet, and the other side I will salvage. So now pretty much this is almost done. I can get my wet brush around there a little bit more and pick up a little more color, but I think we're good to go. So just by adding a little bit of blue in that area and we're good. And that was like right at the beginning of the painting. This side, what I'm going to do is I used a tiny little piece of tissue and I pushed it down to take the water out, then gently clean the area that I wanted not to have any red in it, and I am going to dry this again. That's for those people that don't like to wait too long, like me. And that pretty much will be the fixing of this ornament, and you did see the whole rest of the painting. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time. Happy painting!